Plenty with the storylines from Singapore. It was unbelievably hot. That was the first thing. We've had the heat hazard warning already from the FIA, and we saw lots of dry ice in the cars, the garage doors being closed whenever possible to keep the mechanics as cool as possible with some air conditioning. They have air conditioning. At least they have air conditioning in the garages there at Singapore. Very, very hot though. And a tough time to keep the tyres in the right temperature zone for a lap, a quick lap, and certainly a tough time in terms of projecting tyre temperatures and tyre energies into longer runs. But through all the storylines, and there were plenty of storylines, George Russell, Liam Lawson, Charles Leclerc inappropriately released from the garage, drove into Lando Norris at a restart. In the pit lane, Lando just driven into the pit wall on the outside. Probably the slowest ever accident in Formula One history, probably, but it damaged the right front wing of the McLaren, and that was annoying. It's a front wing gone. The cost of that, the time that went into building it, very quickly replaced. But interestingly, thereafter, Lando slightly off his game and not able to get within half a second of Oscar Piastri. And then beyond that, a great story for Isaac Hadjar, just turned 21 between Baku and Singapore to be second quickest for Racing Bulls. But despite all of that, the most significant point of practice today in Singapore on the Friday, under lights at night, was right at the end when we had a face-off between Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri. There's been a lot of questions about how well Max and the Red Bull would be suited to the demands of Singapore. More slow corners than we saw at Baku, but nonetheless, we know that the Red Bull is quick on slow corners now, quick in and out. And with the number of those slow corners, how was it going to perform in terms of tyre management? Well, right at the end, because of the two red flags for George Russell and then Liam Lawson, right at the end, there was not enough time to go out on fuel, which is what many of the teams had planned. So instead, some of the drivers, some of the teams attempted what they call continuous runs, which normally aren't a big deal, but around Singapore, not giving the tyres a chance to breathe, not doing a slow lap before you do your next quick one is a big demand. But that's what the teams right at the front wanted to know. That's the sort of information they wanted, how the tyres would react to these continuous runs. There wasn't enough time to do more than about 5 laps, but that was quite a lot around Singapore. And both Oscar Piastri in the McLaren Mercedes and Max Verstappen in the Red Bull Honda did that. And they went out at about exactly the same time. And at the start of those runs, on those new softs, that is when they set their fastest laps. And now let's have a look at that, because this is, for me, this was the most important and telling part of all the information that was out there on Friday. Now, Oscar Piastri, on his first clear lap, he did a warm-up lap, but then he did a 30.7. That made him fastest of the day. But Max only a tenth slower, 30.8. So very, very close between the two. But as predicted, the McLaren, a slightly better car, probably in terms of its aerodynamic efficiency around Singapore than the Red Bull. But Red Bull have made some improvements, indeed some upgrades going into Singapore around the front wing flap area. And it seems to be working well for Max, because look at what happened next. Max kind of chickened out on his next lap, did a very slow lap, a 2-minute lap, and then he did his 4 continuous run laps on that set of soft tyres. 35.0, 34.3, 34.2, 33.6. If you directly compare the last 3 laps of both drivers' runs, Max was quicker on all 3. So that to me says, yeah, McLaren very, very quick here. It's going to be incredibly close between the two. But look how good the Red Bull RB21 in its latest form is with that tyre management. Now, maybe that's not enough to be able to say they've got it licked. It wasn't a particularly long run, but it was as long as McLaren. And look at the pace Max is doing that. With the tyres getting hot, he's still able to manage them. And on his last lap, he's doing a 33.6 and Oscar Piastri a 33.9. So that was a very telling little cameo right at the end of Friday practice. But getting back to it, let's go back to FP1, what happened when the track was pretty green this morning. Fernando Alonso, quickest in the Aston Martin. He looked very quick all day. He was very quick in FP2 as well, but didn't finish his lap because of the Liam Lawson red flags that came out in the last sector. It happened at turn 16. Liam got a lot of curb, but he hit the curb in an oversteery sort of way. And then classic Liam Lawson, because he drives on the rear, he was just a passenger there afterwards. Whereas Isaac Hadjar, driving on the front of the cars, we've always said, looking absolutely superb and completely on top of things. Bearing in mind, he'd never been to Singapore before. His 4th lap, he was in the top 6. Unbelievable performance today from Isaac Hadjar. Really, really impressive. But anyway, going back to it, Fernando Alonso will be disappointed that quickest in P1 did not parlay into a proper lap time in FP2, but he was right there on his first 2 sectors and would have been top 3 probably. So Aston Martin, Mercedes looking really strong this weekend, and Lance Stroll also right on the pace as well. But going back to FP1, everybody on the soft tyres doing those runs except for Carlos Sainz. And when he went out on that medium, everybody was in the pits adjusting the car, getting ready to go out on their softs. He went to P1. He was quickest at that point. He never went out on softs, so that's quite good news, I guess, for Williams, saving the softs. And Mercedes also only on mediums in FP1. They didn't look particularly quick, but they were on mediums, so the jury was out before you went into FP2. Charles Leclerc, very good out of the box. Max Verstappen, right there as well. Lewis Hamilton, also very good in FP1. So you finished the morning or the afternoon, the early afternoon session, and you said, wow, Aston Martin in the frame this weekend. Let's hope they can keep up the pace. Ferrari definitely very quick, even though the top speeds were virtually the same between all the teams. And so we went into FP2 with the track, in theory, picking up more grip. But almost as soon as it started, George Russell had the most extraordinary moment when he appeared to lose the rear, then got into a slight understeer, corrected it with opposite lock, and then just basically locked up the brakes and went straight into the Tech Pro barrier on the outside, head on, and damaged the nose of the car quite badly. So he was therefore out of from the rest of the session. So we don't really know how quick the Mercedes were going to be. Kimi Antonelli, not bad. First time at the track as well for him. So his time there, not representative of where he is. He probably would have been top 6 or 7, I think. He says he probably thinks he would have been right up with the leaders. So for Mercedes, definitely a strange day, and one from which they did not get anything like the right amount of data. And then not long afterwards, the Reds came out again for Liam Lawson. So it was kind of difficult to get those laps in. As I said, it was Oscar Piastri and Max that went out right at the end, did those times to be first and third. Isaac Hadjar did that time, 30.8, reflecting how good the Racing Bulls is, how well he's driving it. But that was a classic example of being out on the soft, doing 2 slow laps, getting the very quick lap out of it, and then doing another cool down lap. Very different from the continuous run laps we were just talking about at the start of the video. But and he did that time, 30.8, when Max and Oscar were doing their continuous runs right at the end, and the track was getting quicker then. But that isn't to detract from how well Isaac had drove that lap. Really good. Fernando, as I say, got traffic, but still 30.8. He'll be very happy with that. He didn't do the continuous run business that Oscar and Max did. Lance Stroll reinforcing that, really, 31.2. Esteban Ocon looking better than he's ever looked all year, actually. Really looking comfortable on this circuit. The car looks good too, 31.2. And Oliver Behrman not too far away either. First time at the track for him. And Carlos Sainz, always there or thereabout. Alex Albon didn't do any running in FP1, had a brake problem. But the Williams don't look too bad at all around Singapore. And Charles Leclerc and Lewis, not particularly good in FP2. So some head scratching at Ferrari there, particularly, I think, with that incident with Lando. Obviously, would have upset everybody in the Ferrari garage when that sort of thing happens. Apart from those continuous runs at the end, though, for me, the big story was Lando Norris, because he looked very good in FP1. And he looked like he was going to have one of these days building into a weekend where his lovely rhythm embraces a circuit like Singapore. Very good on street circuits. But Oscar started to look, as predicted on the live stream I did, Oscar coming back strongly from Baku, started to look very good. And whenever he went slightly quicker, Lando was obviously raising his game. And the more he raised his game, the more ragged he became. And you saw him touching, just glancing some walls, some oversteer moments, which we never saw Max doing, by the way. Oscar too, but more in control, just doing everything right. Whereas Lando looked a little bit, wow, I'd gone a bit too deep here, a little bit early on the throttle there. Didn't look quite together. And it all came to a head right at the end. Another classic Lando Norris moment when Oscar was doing that continuous run. And Lando's guys got on the radio and said, Lando, doing a continuous run now. He'd done his time, the best time he was going to do. And he got back on the radio. All credit to him that he did this on the public radio system. You know, everybody could hear it. But he said, why would I do that? I'm half a second off the pace. And the car's not half a second slower. It's me. It's my driving. I need to work at my driving. To which the reply was something like, well, in that case, you know, let's hope you can find the half second in your driving sort of thing. We'll leave it up to you. And he didn't do any. He did one lap. It was something like a 36.3, which didn't really mean anything. And the rest of them were all 2 minutes slow laps. So I would say Lando finishing the day feeling very discombobulated and not really on top of where he is with the car, the circuit. But as I said all along, not where he should be relative to Oscar Piastri. And I don't think he feels comfortable yet of how he's going to raise his game when Oscar inevitably goes quicker tomorrow with the track getting more grip. And I think that's the point. I think today it looked a little bit as if Lando was starting to force the issue, having had a very, very rhythmic FP1. He was starting to force the issue in FP2 when Oscar started to get it together. And going quicker than the track allowed him to go. And that's when the errors started to creep in. And he, providing he just stays calm and keeps the rhythm, I think he'll be right there. But it's very easy, as Liam Lawson discovered, to go faster than the track allows you to go on a street circuit like this. I mean, it's unfortunate for Liam, after the great performance in Baku, that this race isn't Austin, Texas, where there's lots of space. You're not going to hit anything really if you go off. And it's a circuit where Liam Lawson's going to look pretty good. But Singapore is everything that Baku is, plus more in terms of slow corners, curbs, places where you can get the car out of shape and hit walls. And it was predictable. And we predicted it, that Liam, having been super confident after Baku, would take that level of confidence to Singapore and start driving the same way, on the rear of the car, braking late, using more curb, doing all these things that allowed him to go quickly in Baku. But of course, Singapore, very different. And whereas Isaac Hadjar, not really rewarded for the way he was driving in Baku, driving exactly the same way now in Singapore, but giving himself a much larger sweet spot around which he can operate as Max is operating. I mean, following Max today on board, everything looked... There was a couple of times on that very tight left-hander after the bridge, he had understeer. And in fact, he'd had quite a lot of understeer early on. They had to put like 3 clicks of front flap on the car. And Oscar too. Everybody had more understeer than they thought going in. And then the track got better and it picked up grip. But through that left-hander, there were a few moments when he was sort of turning in and understeer, and you could see him sort of being this far away from where he wanted to be on the inside of the corner, the rotation point. But it was fascinating to see how he got around that. It wasn't anything to do with how he went into the corner, whether he went in a bit deeper, later, earlier. All he did was just stay off the throttle longer, just let the car go in nice and slowly, lots of patience, not worried in any way about minimum speed on that corner, and then just getting a beautiful straight exit. And you thought, well, that's not going to be a very quick lap, and bang, it was like a tenth slower than Oscar Piastri right there. And the tyre's still in pretty good shape, albeit with that 2-minute lap he did, which kind of detracts a little bit from the continuous run he did thereafter. But yeah, we'll give him that one, I suppose. Let's pretend there's going to be a safety car after one lap of the race. So yeah, it's looking like it's going to be a very, very good race, close race between Red Bull, McLaren. I suspect Ferrari will pick it up tomorrow. Interesting to see what Mercedes do from where they are. Lack of information, struggling a bit. George will have to pick up quite a lot of space. He'll have to jump a few spaces to get to where he needs to be. And then again, you know, that Isaac Hadjar is not going to go away. That is for sure. And Fernando Alonso too. Aston Martin, Mercedes looking really, really good around Singapore on the Friday. But we've said that many times on other circuits. Let's see, as I say, if we can translate that into a weekend performance that allows Fernando to be right where he should be. Big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, to TrackNinja, and to REC Watches for their support of this channel. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.